What is good? Osiris here, stuck in the middle. Thank you for joining. I had a great response on one of my videos, and this is on the Arizona State University situation, but this isn't to beat a dead horse. This situation, I'm using it as a microcosm to a macro issue. So it's not really about the situation, just using it for a good discussion. Thank you, Rupert Paxton. Said on the video to replying to me, you make a good point, but the girls were wrong in that they were rude and verbally abusive. It could have been handled better. In all the minutes I've spent talking about this scenario, I never brought this up. And I'm like, we are so far apart. I'm not, and that's really one of my top things is if we disagree, let's do it respectfully. And I didn't even bring this up, and it matters a lot. So in their world, these young ladies viewed the presence of straight white males with stickers of political statements they didn't agree with as violent offenders. Just because you view somebody as violent, I'm not going to argue the terms of it, doesn't mean you have to respond in a violent way using their terms, the terms of the left, because there's no physical altercation. Just this is what they view as violence now. It doesn't mean that they have to respond. And the way they responded by their own definition was in a violent manner. They could have still had their position about where they were was a specific area in the library or school center or whatever it was as a critical multicultural space. And they could have approached the young men and said, this is a special area. They could even just approach and said, hey, what's your name? My name is this. Do you have a second? I see you're studying, but do you have a second to talk? They could have done that. We didn't see the whole. Let's just talk hypothetically because we didn't see the whole interaction. I doubt that happened though. But just hypothetically, couldn't they have had the same opinion and approached them on a standpoint of obviously educating and get an idea if the young men were trying to troll them or just didn't know or was ignorant about the area or what? And had a respectful conversation of this area of the student center. Are you familiar with what it's about? And I'm not trying to kick you guys out. I just want to have a conversation if you have time. Of course, they didn't do that because it's not about gaining understanding. It's about exerting power. And this is from the top down in the leftist ideology. They are from president to above president to whoever controls the president, down to governors, down to mayors. It's not about having a respectful discussion. It's about exerting power. And their approach of violence back to those men shows that. They're not about trying to come together or educate. They're about exerting authority over somebody else. And this comes from the idea of Marxism. And I hate to even use this term, but really, all of these philosophers that believed in Marxism, whether it's George Sorel or Friedrich Engels or Karl Marx himself, they all believed in by any means necessary. That's what justified the violence from Black Lives Matter. That's what justifies the violence in their terms by these young ladies against those men. They might even call that defense. The people who would argue against me, and that's where Malcolm X got his by all means necessary too. And I could, even though I respect Malcolm X a lot, very bright, really great figure historically, without question, I did not agree with that standpoint by any means necessary. Absolutely not. The means matter. We're having school board discussions in different states, and school board members are saying that there are death threats and stuff like that. If that is true, people saying, hey, we don't want critical race theory, and they're threatening school board members. That's unacceptable, and you have to stand up and say that's unacceptable. That's not what we're about. Don't distract the issue. We denounce any of that. Arrest them, find them, get them out of here. They don't belong with what we're talking about. We're concerned parents. Same with Black Lives Matter. They never did that, never denounced the violence because they were for the violence. That's why the means matter. The means that these young ladies took matter. We can't find common ground. We can't share a society or a government with that approach. And that's why, in my interactions and what I've seen from Nicole Hannah Jones, for example, is she has that ideology, but her approach is not that of a violent approach. And I respect that. We can have a conversation if you're not abrasive. But people who would argue against me about Karl Marx or Friedrich Engels, these people, they would say, no, no, no. They didn't say violence was the only way. They believed if you have an advantage in the democratic process, you don't need violence. What is That's your argument? This violence approach is either you are okay with violence or you're not. There is no gray area on this. I don't care if people who agree with me on freedom, I don't care if there's only 100 of us in the country, the violence is not an okay response. Out of defense, it can be. I'm not saying violence is never the thing, especially out of a defense position. But to say, oh, if we have an advantage in the political system, we don't need violence. That was Karl Marx simplifying his position. That is not a non-violent position. That is a pro-violent position, and it's just unnecessary and wasteful and inefficient if you already have power. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. Let me know if you think that has any meaning or anything. But if you believe in this critical space, if your approach is that of understanding, we can get somewhere, whether it's a peaceful separation or a finding where our mutual interests converge. That is a critical race theory term. Then we can do something. Thanks for listening. Take care.